and I don't fish much in the ocean. But let me first thank Mark and John Sr. and the other people who have brought this wonderful meeting together. This is a very, very important meeting. The idea that parks, and I said this a little bit yesterday, that parks are more than parks. Parks are not only a source of health by connecting people to the natural world and to their own bodies, but parks are the potential infrastructure, one of the most important potential infrastructure for a movement that will connect people to nature. Unless we have that movement, we will not get to the place where we can deal seriously with the major environmental problems. Let me first say that much has happened here in Australia. There is great research coming out of Australia, and I'll mention some of that later. There are great researchers. Dr. Marty Townsend, who's probably here, helped produce a great report for healthy parks, healthy people. I think it was updated in 2008. It's one of the best papers, or best products that describe the known research on the connection between children and nature in the world. Nothing as good, I don't think, has been produced in the United States. Only Great Britain, I think, and certainly Dr. William Byrd's work with Natural England and Australia have produced the kinds of documents that really make the scientific case for the connection between children, nature, and health. We need much more of that. We need, in fact, to produce those kinds of papers, those kinds of communications on an international level, and I hope that one of the things that comes out of this conference will be an effort to do just that. We can't do it just one country at a time. I also want to acknowledge that people come to this issue of the connection of people to nature, particularly connection of children to nature, from very different points of view. Not everyone sees this the same way or has the same experience. Certainly many of the Aboriginal people who are here have a different experience than I had growing up a suburban kid in Kansas City, where Green Elvis comes from, Eco Elvis comes from. I was talking, in fact, 2 nights ago, or 2 days ago, we took a boat ride with David Mabuna, I think I pronounced your name right, who is the head of the South African National Parks. And I was asking him about, what about kids, you know, in the far rural regions of South Africa? Are they like kids in my country and in much of Australia, at least the urban areas and suburban areas of Australia? Do they stay inside and play video games? I mean, it's kind of maybe a stupid question, but do they have the same kind of experience? Because in the United States and Canada, et cetera, you go to the rural areas and they're just as much inside as they are in the cities. They're not going outside and experiencing that. In fact, the family farm has all but disappeared in the United States. You know, those kids, if they work, they end up working at 7-Eleven, at a convenience store perhaps, or they move to the city. So I asked him, how about the far reaches of South Africa and the far rural? He says, no. He said that's not happening there. Television hasn't reached there yet. The internet hasn't reached there yet. Kids still make their own toys. They play outdoors. He told me that he made his own toys when he was a boy, because that's where he grew up, out of clay. And he said, besides, we have different priorities. He said, we're still trying to get buildings for our schools. We're still trying to get rid of the schools under the trees in those areas. I said, well, did you know that in Germany and other European countries, and increasingly in the United States, there's this interest in forest schools? And he said, really? And he said, well, they can have ours. So we spent a few minutes thinking about the engineering problem of moving their forest schools to the United States or Germany. in any case, that illustrates, I think, that we come to this from different perspectives. However, we do have this in common. If E.O. Wilson is correct that we are all hardwired to love and to need and to be emotionally connected to nature, then we have this in common. We are all still hunters and gatherers biologically. We've not changed. This is in us. This is part of us. This is part of our humanity, this connection to nature. And it doesn't matter where we come from, what race we are, what our history is, that is in us at some level, if E.O. Wilson's right. I think he is. Let me read a few paragraphs. This is in the first chapter of Last Child in the Woods. If when we were young we tramped through forests of Nebraska cottonwoods, or raised pigeons on a rooftop in Queens, or fished for Ozark bluegills, or hiked in the Australian bush, or felt the swell of a wave that traveled 1,000 miles before lifting our boat, we were bound to the natural world, and we remain so today. Nature still informs our years. It is the sound once heard that lifts us, carries us. For children, nature comes in many forms: a newborn calf, a pet that lives and dies, a worn path through the woods, a fort nested in stinging nettles, a damp, mysterious edge of a vacant lot. Whatever shape nature takes, it offers each child an older, larger world separate from parents. Unlike television, nature does not steal time. It amplifies it. Nature offers healing for a child living in a destructive family or neighborhood. It serves as a blank slate upon which a child draws and reinterprets the culture's fantasies. Nature inspires creativity in a child by demanding visualization and the full use of the senses. Given a chance, a child will bring the confusion of the world to the woods, wash it in the creek, turn it over to see what lies on the unseen side of that confusion. Nature can frighten a child too, and this fright serves a purpose. In nature, a child finds freedom, fantasy, and privacy, a place distant from the adult world, a separate piece. These are some of the utilitarian values of nature, but at a deeper level, nature gives itself to children for its own sake, not as a reflection of a culture. At this level, inexplicable nature provokes humility. You are here today, many of you. You work in the realm of parks because, most likely, you had some special place in nature that you went to when you were a kid. It may have been along a beach, it may have been in the woods, it may have been on a stream, some special place that was yours, that you owned. My special place was in the woods behind my house in suburban Kansas City. As an 8-year-old, I could go out my back door through the yard, through the hedge, into the cornfield where I had my underground fort, and from there on into the woods and the fields and the farms that seemed to go on forever. I spent much of my boyhood in those woods with my dog. Those woods were my woods. I owned those woods. Those woods were in my heart then, and they are in my heart now. I had such a sense of ownership of those woods that I pulled out, I think, as an 8-year-old, hundreds of survey stakes that I knew had something to do with the bulldozers that were taking out other woods. And I think I held them off for a while. I told that story a few years ago in Albuquerque at a very interesting group called the Quivira Coalition, and it brings together ranchers and environmentalists in the western United States. And together they do land trusts, et cetera. They find common cause. I told that story, and then afterwards, during the question and answer period, a rancher stood up, and he was the real deal. His jeans had not been acid washed. And he had thick plastic glasses and a white handlebar mustache, and he was sunburned, et cetera. And he said, "You know that story you told about pulling out survey stakes?" And I said, "Yes." I thought I was in trouble. It looked very conservative. And he said, I did that as a boy. And then he began to cry in front of 500 people, half of whom were wearing cowboy hats. And despite his deep embarrassment, he continued to speak about his sense of grief that his might be one of the last generations to have that kind of sense of ownership of land, and it has nothing to do with money. To me, that's the central question of how we introduce our children and the next generations to the natural world. Will they have that place to go to in their heart that many of you have the privilege to have and that I have the privilege to have? Will that exist for them?